Pig is undoubtedly one of the most popular and beloved cartoons worldwide. What many don't realize is that this seemingly simple show hides a series of fascinating details that most people never notice. For instance, Daddy Pig, being an architect, wasn't just a random choice by the creators of the series. In fact, it has everything to do with one of the most famous fables of all time, the Three Little Pigs. If you remember, in the classic story, the smartest pig builds his house out of bricks to protect himself from the big bad wolf. And when Mr. Bull and his team arrive to build a new house, they ask which materials to use, and the options resemble the exact materials from the fable.
Is it going to be built of straw?
Or sticks? Or bricks, Mr. Pig?
So, I wonder, could the pig in the story be an ancestor of Daddy Pig? And could Wendy's wolf family, which appears at the end, be descendants of the big bad wolf? It's quite possible, considering Mr. Wolf even blows at the house to test its strength, just like in the fable. These incredible connections between the fable and the show reveal how Peppa Pig is full of details and references that make the series even more interesting for those who pay attention, just like you and us. Want to discover what else you might have missed? Then let's dive in. Get comfy in your chair because we're just getting started. Have you ever noticed that almost every house in Peppa's town is on top of a hill? And it's not just the houses. The school, the hospital, and the market are all perched up high too. In fact, everything seems to be situated on the top of a hill. And surprisingly, this isn't by accident. One of the most widespread theories among fans is that the town where Peppa and her family live may experience frequent flooding, which would explain why Daddy Pig, the town's architect, always designs everything on higher ground. In the episode Flood, this theory gains traction as we see the town flood after just one night of rain. So, having houses and buildings on top of hills, besides being a practical solution, gives the show a distinctive visual identity and is yet another proof that even the smallest details in Peppa Pig are carefully thought out. So, next time you watch the show, pay attention to how the hills are part of Peppa's world's visual identity. We know that in Peppa Pig, animals live like humans, but when they get sick, who takes care of them? Well, there's a bit of confusion here. Dr. Bear, for instance, takes care of Peppa when she's sick. But here's the question. Is he a doctor or a veterinarian? After all, he only treats animals, even though he's a doctor. On the other hand, Dr. Hamster is a veterinarian who takes care of animals that don't behave like humans, like her clients' pets. So this raises an interesting question. In Peppa's world, what's the difference between doctors and vets if they're all animals? This curiosity shows how Peppa Pig creates its own set of rules and logic, making the show even more fun to watch. Speaking of veterinarians, in one episode of the series, we see Madame Gazelle taking her guinea pigs for a checkup with Dr. Hamster. The thing is, let's admit, it's a bit ironic, isn't it? After all, hamsters and guinea pigs are very similar animals, so how can Dr. Hamster take care of creatures that are practically her relatives? Moreover, there's another factor that's somewhat eerie. While guinea pigs live an average of 8 years, hamsters have a much shorter life expectancy of just 3 years. In other words, Doctor, Hamster is taking care of animals that, if they were like her, would live much longer than she would. Of course, this would only be true if Dr. Hamster were an ordinary animal, which is obviously not the case. But this play on the animal's life expectancies adds an extra layer of humor for those who notice the details in the show. One detail that goes unnoticed by many in Peppa Pig is in the clocks we see in various places. When scenes take place in the morning, the clocks almost always show 10 a.m. This is a detail that almost no one notices and seems insignificant, but it repeats itself several times throughout the series. You can notice this, for example, when the children visit the zoo or when Peppa and George visit Daddy Pig's office. Perhaps it's a choice by the animators to maintain visual consistency and avoid continuity errors. Or maybe 10 a.m. is the character's favorite time. Either way, now you'll start noticing this too. And if you have fun watching Peppa Pig, comment "fun" below. Mr. Fox is one of those characters who always seems to be up to something, so much so that in an episode where the school children hold a charity fair, he has the audacity to blatantly trick Emily Elephant, taking all the items from her stall without paying a penny. And it doesn't stop there. He also appears in the episode Night Animals, about to steal Grandpa Pig's chickens, proving he's definitely not the most trustworthy animal in town. But things get even more interesting when you notice that in front of the police station, there are papers with symbols identical to those on Mr. Fox's van, the symbol of a fox. Could he be wanted? Maybe many of the items in his van are actually stolen. And to add a touch of irony, we see that Mr. Fox's son, Freddy, dresses up as a police officer. Could he end up arresting his own father one day? It would be hilarious and tragic at the same time if that happened. In the episode The Fire Engine, there's a detail that might go unnoticed, but it's quite bizarre. Daddy Pig mentions that he's going to meet the dad's football team for a barbecue. What's curious is that among the participants are a pig and a bull. Now, think about it. What kind of meat are they going to grill? Could it be that the football dads are cannibals? This idea is rather disturbing, but it also shows how much the creators of the show like to play with strange concepts. So the next time you watch this episode, keep an eye out for the creepy details of this barbecue. And as we just mentioned, just like in the morning, the clocks in Peppa Pig always show 10 a.m. In the afternoon, they usually show 4 p.m. This happens, for instance, when the pig family visits Madame Gazelle's house, or in other scenes that take place after lunch. This is probably a way for the animators to maintain visual consistency and avoid mistakes, like showing 4 a.m. when it should be 4 p.m. After all, it would be quite strange to see the kids at school in the middle of the night, right? But now that you know this detail, you'll start noticing it every time you watch the show. And since Peppa Pig is from England, it could very well also be the afternoon tea time. Mr. Bull is a character who always appears when needed, but have you noticed that in the barbecue episode we just mentioned, he's part of the dad's football team? That's all well and good, but how is he on the dad's team even though he doesn't have kids in Peppa's school? Moreover, he's always around when the kids are being picked up from school, which is a bit suspicious, considering he doesn't have children there. Could it be that Mr. Bull has a crush on someone at the school? This raises some suspicions about his true intentions. Continuing the idea from the previous point, it seems that the reason Mr. Bull is always at the school might have to do with a secret crush on Madame Gazelle he had in the past. For instance, in the episode Magic Words, he appears mowing the school's lawn, and when he informs Madame Gazelle, she simply shuts the door in his face. When the kids remind the teacher to say thank you, she opens the door and says thank you, but then immediately shuts the door in his face again. It seems that Madame Gazelle isn't very interested in starting a new romance. Should someone tell poor Mr. Bull before he gets hurt even more? Thankfully, he eventually married Mrs. Cow, and now everything is sorted out. Now that you've discovered Mr. Bull's heartbreak, subscribe to the channel so the same thing doesn't happen to you. Daddy Pig might be a talented architect, but when it comes to getting hands-on, he's not so great. A perfect example of this is when he tries to hammer a simple nail into the wall and ends up creating a massive hole. To cover up the mess, he decides to hang a picture of the kids over the hole, as if nothing happened. Is that really the kind of example he should be setting for the kids? It's funny, but definitely not the best idea. In Peppa Pig's world, where almost all the characters are animals, an interesting question arises. Could the zoo, where many animals can never leave, be considered a kind of prison? In the episode Zoo, we see that animals like turtles and penguins live there, who don't have the same developed intellect as the main characters. This suggests that only the animals that don't behave like humans end up being kept in the zoo, similar to the characters' pets. It's an interesting reflection on how the series portrays different types of animals. Peppa Pig's universe is much more diverse than it seems. In addition to animals, the series also features humans, like the pirate and Santa Claus, who appear in some episodes. And to make everything even more fun, even fruits and vegetables have their own lives, like Mr. Potato and his crew, who put on shows for the kids. This makes Peppa Pig's world even more fascinating and full of surprises for those who pay attention. Finally, going back to the zoo, we realize that some animals in Peppa Pig are clearly carnivores, like Mr. Lion, who's in charge of the place. When Madame Gazelle comments that not all animals eat vegetables, Mr. Lion smiles and calls her Madame Gnu. This is a reference to one of the animals that lions hunt the most in Africa, suggesting that Mr. Lion's predatory instincts are very much alive, even in a world where animals live peacefully together. Creepy, isn't it? If I were Madame Gazelle, I'd keep an eye on Mr. Lion. After all, he might get confused and think she's a real new. Now, pick one of the two videos appearing on the screen and keep having fun with us, because the fun is just getting started.